People were drowned, muzzled, and exiled, and everyone called it justice. In this video, we're digging into 39 punishments that aged terribly. You'll see witches tested by freezing rivers where survival itself proved guilt. You'll see farm animals dragged into courtrooms and sentenced like tiny criminals. We'll visit warships where a spilled paint bucket meant bloody lashes. We'll watch kids beaten for writing left-handed and neighbors shamed in iron masks. Some of these laws were backed by kings, churches, and respected judges. Others were invented by small towns convinced humiliation could fix everything. By the end, you'll question old justice and what still passes for fair. Salem witch swimming tests that doomed innocent people either way. In Salem, some accused women literally sank or hanged either way. Officials tied their hands and feet, then tossed them into cold water. If they floated, judges claimed the water rejected evil and called witchcraft. If they sank, people rushed with hooks, sometimes too late to rescue. Neighbors packed the riverbanks in Massachusetts, treating it like grim entertainment. Many accusations started from petty grudges, land disputes, or teenage hysteria. Yet once the test began, even doubting onlookers stayed terrifyingly silent. The logic flipped reality. Survival meant guilt. Drowning suggested innocence afterward. It turned fear, religion, and bad science into one deadly coin toss. Medieval animal trials, where pigs and rats got sentenced. In medieval Europe, even farm animals ended up in courtrooms facing punishment. Judges in France and Germany summoned pigs, goats, even swarms of rats. A pig that bit a child might be dressed in human clothes. Lawyers actually argued whether the animal understood crime, like some twisted theater. Rats sometimes failed to appear, so lawyers blamed cats and distance. Villagers crowded into stone churches serving as makeshift courtrooms for hearings. Sentences could include hanging, burning, or exile from certain fields. People believed justice required punishing anything connected to tragedy, human or not. Instead of fixing sanitation or safety, they prosecuted livestock like tiny criminals. The Cadaver Synod, putting a long-dead pope on trial. In Rome, one pope dragged another dead pope into a courtroom. Around the year 900, Pope Stephen VI targeted the corpse of Formosus. They dressed the rotting body in papal robes and sat it upright. A terrified deacon answered questions for the corpse, pretending it could respond. The charges included illegally becoming pope and moving bishops between cities. Bishops watched in stunned silence as politics turned into literal dark comedy. The court declared the dead pope guilty and stripped his vestments. They even cut off the corpse's blessing fingers before tossing it away. It showed how personal vendettas outweighed dignity, theology, and basic human respect. Trial by ordeal, forcing suspects to hold red-hot iron. In parts of medieval Europe, guilt supposedly showed up on burned hands. A suspect might walk several paces carrying a red-hot iron bar. Priests wrapped the wounds, then inspected them days later for signs. If the burns healed miraculously, people called it proof of innocence. If the wounds festered, they claimed God had exposed secret guilt. Villagers watched anxiously, trusting ritual more than careful witnesses or evidence. Some priests quietly rigged the test kinder when they believed someone innocent. Others followed procedure rigidly, convinced they were letting heaven decide everything. Either way, people learned that survival depended more on luck than truth. Trial by combat. Letting swords decide who was right. Imagine settling a lawsuit by stabbing instead of presenting documents and witnesses. In medieval Europe, trial by combat let nobles fight to prove arguments. Two feuding men might meet in a field, watched by nervous onlookers. They believed God would grant victory to the one telling the truth. Sometimes, champions fought in place of weak or elderly parties involved. There are records of armored knights dueling over land, insults, or inheritance. In rare cases, even women fought, using bizarre rules and pit arrangements. Losing meant not just defeat, but often execution or confiscated property. Justice became a matter of skill, strength, and armor, not facts. Ducking stools. Used to dunk nagging wives in filthy water. In English and colonial towns, some women got punished by repeated dunking. Authorities reserved ducking stools mostly for wives accused of being scolds. They strapped the woman to a wooden chair fixed on a long beam. Crowds gathered along the riverbank as she was swung over water. The chair dropped suddenly, plunging her under cold, dirty, sometimes sewage-filled rivers. Officials claimed the humiliation would calm gossip, complaining, or supposed nagging. Neighbors laughed, shouted insults, and treated the punishment like cheap public entertainment. Women could emerge shivering and bruised, sometimes getting sick afterward from contamination. Marital disagreements turned into literal water torture instead of serious, respectful conversation. Scold's bridles. Iron muzzles locked on women who talked back. In Scotland and northern England, authorities clamped iron cages onto women's heads. These devices, called scold's bridles or branks, punished so-called troublesome wives. The metal frame fit over the skull, with a protruding plate inside. That plate pressed on the tongue, making speech painful or nearly impossible. Sometimes it even had spikes, threatening injury if the woman tried talking. She might be paraded through town while neighbors stared, whispered, or laughed. Officials said it controlled gossip and slander, especially against local leaders. In reality, it targeted women who challenged husbands, clergy, or powerful men. Silence became enforced, with steel instead of listening, mediation, or basic fairness. The Scarlet Letter. Punishment. Branding. Adulterers in public for life. In some early New England colonies, personal sins became permanent street labels. People convicted of adultery could be forced to wear stitched letter badges. The most infamous example is the bright letter for supposed marital betrayal. Instead of jail time, the community demanded constant visibility of their mistake. Every market trip, church gathering, or town meeting repeated the same exposure. Neighbors read that letter before remembering the person's actual name or story. Children grew up recognizing the symbol long before understanding adult relationships. The law claimed it protected morality by warning others against secret affairs. Really, it froze one chapter of someone's life into endless public shaming. Pillory and stocks for mocking or insulting local authorities. In many European and colonial towns, disrespect could land you in wooden restraints. The pillory locked a person's head and hands between heavy boards. Stocks pinned their ankles, so they sat helpless in the open square. Local officials used these punishments for mocking magistrates, clergy, or town rules. Passers-by hurled rotten vegetables, mud, and whatever else they could grab. Sometimes people threw stones, turning light punishment into genuinely dangerous beatings. There are records of victims losing teeth or suffering serious infections afterward. Yet authorities defended the spectacle as moral theater for everyone watching. Power protected its image by turning humiliation into a daytime public show. Victorian debtors' prisons, jailing families over just a few pennies. In 19th century Britain, unpaid bills could lock you behind iron bars. Debtors' prisons like Marshalsea and Fleet held people over surprisingly small amounts. Someone might be imprisoned for owing a tailor, landlord, or local shopkeeper. Once inside, prisoners often had to pay fees just to survive there. Families, including children, sometimes moved into the prison with the debtor. Charles Dickens's own father was locked up, inspiring his later fictional settings. Many inmates couldn't work enough to pay their old debts off, so they stayed trapped, spiraling deeper into poverty behind thick stone walls. A system meant to encourage responsibility instead froze people permanently in failure. Transportation to Australia for stealing something as small as bread. For many poor Britons, a missing loaf could mean exile across oceans. In the 18th and 19th centuries, courts sentenced petty thieves to transportation. Ships carried convicts from crowded English prisons to distant Australian colonies. Offenses could include stealing clothing, food, or small items from employers. The journey itself took months, with disease, cramped quarters, and brutal discipline. Upon arrival, convicts worked on farms, roads, and government projects under supervision. Some eventually earned freedom and built families in New South Wales. Others died far from the gray streets where their stories began. A desperate hunger or quick theft rewrote entire lives on another continent. Children sent to brutal workhouses for petty street pickpocketing. In industrial Britain, city streets swallowed children into harsh institutional worlds. A kid caught stealing bread or handkerchiefs might face a workhouse sentence. Workhouses were supposed to provide shelter and discipline for the poor. Inside, children rose before dawn, worked long hours, and ate thin gruel. Brothers and sisters could be separated, barely seeing each other during days. Tasks included stone breaking, factory work, or scrubbing endless floors and laundry. Punishments for mistakes included beatings, solitary confinement, or reduced rations. Many of these kids were orphans or abandoned during economic crises. Instead of help, they received punishment disguised as tough love and order. Caning school kids simply for writing with their left hand. For many 20th century children, their dominant hand was treated like misbehavior. In schools across Britain, America, and elsewhere, teachers distrusted left-handed writing. Some educators tied children's left hands behind their backs during lessons. Others used canes, rulers, or straps to smack the wrong hand repeatedly. Kids were forced to relearn every letter using their weaker side. Classmates watched as teachers framed this painful correction as moral training. Left-handedness was sometimes linked to superstition, clumsiness, or even supposed wickedness. The punishment left many with messy handwriting, anxiety, or lifelong embarrassment. A simple, natural difference became a target for needless, stubborn classroom cruelty. The dunce cap, humiliating slow students instead of teaching them. Instead of extra help, some struggling students got a literal pointed hat. In 19th and early 20th century classrooms, teachers used the infamous dunce cap. A child considered slow might sit on a stool facing the wall. The tall cone hat marked them as the class failure for everyone. Other students snickered or avoided the chair, fearing they'd be next. Teachers claimed this public embarrassment would motivate better effort and attention. Instead, kids often shut down, dreading every mistake on the blackboard. The cap turned learning into a minefield instead of a patient process. It punished confusion rather than fixing overcrowded classrooms and poor teaching methods. Public flogging sailors for spilling a bucket of paint. On some 18th century warships, one clumsy moment could tear open backs. Naval discipline relied heavily on the lash to enforce absolute obedience. A sailor who spilled paint, dropped lines, or answered slowly risked flogging. Punishment took place on deck, with crew assembled to watch in silence. The boatswain's mate counted strokes while officers observed from a comfortable distance. Whips made of knotted rope tore skin, leaving scars like permanent badges. Doctors sometimes stood nearby, checking the man wouldn't die too quickly. The message was clear. Efficiency mattered less than unquestioned, constant obedience. Minor mistakes became bloody lessons about hierarchy under wind-filled canvas sails. Exiling Athenian citizens through petty political ostracism votes. In ancient Athens, democracy sometimes meant voting neighbors out of town. Citizens scratched names onto pottery shards called ostraca during special assemblies. If enough people wrote your name, you faced 10 years exile. No formal charge, just a vague sense you were becoming too powerful. Politicians like Themistocles and Aristides learned popularity could flip unexpectedly overnight. Sometimes rival factions used ostracism to neutralize competition, not protect the city. The exiled citizen kept property, but lost daily voice in Athenian politics. There was no trial, defense speech, or clear list of accusations. It turned democracy's majority rule into a slow, legal form of banishment. Forcing offenders to parade in donkey ears through town. In some European towns, humiliation wore fur and floppy cardboard ears. People guilty of minor offenses might be forced into ridiculous costumes. Donkey ears signaled foolishness, stubbornness, or plain stupidity to every passerby. Offenders sometimes rode real donkeys backward, clutching the saddle awkwardly. Drummers or town criers walked ahead, announcing the wrongdoing loudly and repeatedly. Children pointed, laughed, and followed along like an impromptu parade. Authorities believed the embarrassment would burn the lesson into everyone's memory. Instead, whole crowds enjoyed the spectacle more than the supposed moral lesson. The punishment turned petty mistakes into open-air comedy routines for the village. Shame masks shaped like pigs for loudmouth town gossips. German and Austrian towns once used metal masks to silence particular reputations. These masks, sometimes shaped like pigs or caricatured faces, punished gossipers. The wearer's nose, mouth, and cheeks were exaggerated into ridiculous, grotesque forms. Officials locked the mask in place, making breathing and speaking uncomfortable. Chains sometimes attached the wearer to a post in a crowded square. Neighbors stared as the pig-faced gossip stood sweating behind sharp edges. Some masks carried bells, ringing with every movement and drawing extra attention. The goal was to scare others away from rumors or street chatter. Instead, it created bizarre street theater, while real problems stayed unspoken. Making people wear heavy shame stones hung around their necks. In some European villages, punishments came in the form of literal weight. Small-time offenders might carry heavy stones suspended from their necks. The stones were sometimes carved with symbols representing the person's misdeed. They walked through markets, churches, or town squares, with everyone watching closely. Every step pulled on their shoulders, making breathing and posture difficult. In some places, offenders knelt outside church doors during long services. Locals passed by, recognizing both the person and the carved accusation. Afterward, the physical pain often lingered in bruised skin and muscles. A brief misstep became a dragging burden designed for communal embarrassment. Forcing drunks to wear barrels instead of clothes in public. In various European regions, some drunkards became walking jokes made of wood. People convicted of public drunkenness sometimes wore slats or barrels as clothing. The barrel hung from straps, leaving arms and legs sticking out. Authorities paraded them through streets, ringing bells or shouting their offenses aloud. Crowds laughed, pointed, and occasionally pelted them with small objects. The punishment aimed to shame both the individual and nearby tavern customers. Some cities even kept special barrels stored specifically for these offenders. The chilly air and rough wood added discomfort to the humiliation. Instead of offering help, communities turned substance problems into slapstick street performances. Sumptuary laws, fining peasants for wearing clothes considered too fancy. Imagine getting fined because your outfit looked slightly nicer than expected. In medieval and early modern Europe, sumptuary laws regulated who wore what. Rules specified which classes could wear silk, velvet, or certain bright colors. A merchant's wife wearing rich fabric risked a stiff financial penalty. Tailors sometimes got questioned for making garments considered above a client's status. Officials claimed they were protecting social order and preventing extravagant spending. In reality, wealthy elites protected visible distance from rising middle-class neighbors. Violations might be reported by jealous rivals or watchful city inspectors. Fashion became a legal minefield for anyone climbing the social ladder. Fining people for eating meat during mandated religious fasting seasons. Across Catholic Europe, diet sometimes came with official penalties attached. During Lent and other fasting periods, eating meat broke both spiritual and civil rules. Some regions imposed fines on people caught with forbidden foods on tables. Innkeepers and taverns had to adjust menus or risk serious punishment. Officials inspected markets, watching for suspicious purchases during sacred times. Neighbors sometimes reported each other after smelling roasting meat through shared walls. The line between genuine piety and nosy surveillance blurred in narrow streets. Enforcement varied, but the threat of public shame stayed ever present. Personal meals turned into potential evidence for courts mixing religion and law. Colonial blue laws punishing public kissing or dancing on Sundays. In some American colonies, weekends came with long lists of restrictions. So-called blue laws dictated what people could do on the Sabbath. Activities like public dancing, kissing, or playful games could bring fines. Merchants caught selling goods on Sundays faced penalties or public scolding. In Puritan New England, officials patrolled streets to catch violators. Travelers passing through town sometimes got surprised by unexpected local rules. Church attendance was strongly expected, leaving little space for leisure alternatives. People learned to hide fun behind closed shutters or postponing celebrations. Morality became something monitored by constables instead of personal conscience alone. Forcing gossipers to ride backwards on donkeys through town squares. In some Mediterranean villages, the direction of travel carried deep embarrassment. People accused of gossip or false accusations faced a backward donkey ride. They sat facing the animal's tail, clutching the saddle for balance. Crowds gathered, laughing at the clumsy struggle to stay upright. Sometimes, attendants banged drums or shouted the offense at every corner. The route often passed key locations like markets, fountains, and churches. By the end, the rider was dusty, humiliated, and thoroughly exhausted. Authorities believed the memory would stick better than a simple fine. Once again, public humiliation outshouted any quiet conversations about truth and reconciliation. The prison treadmill, punishing inmates by walking forever nowhere. In 19th century Britain, some prisoners spent days climbing toward nothing. Prisons installed huge tread wheels, early cousins of modern exercise machines. Rows of inmates stepped in unison, turning heavy machinery or grinding grain. Sometimes the wheel powered nothing, it just existed to exhaust bodies. Guards enforced strict silence, so all you heard was wooden creaking. Prisoners might walk thousands of vertical feet every single day. Feet blistered, knees ached, and backs throbbed from endless repetitive motion. For minor crimes, the the punishment felt wildly out of proportion to harm. The treadmill literally converted time and energy into nothing except misery. Whirligig cages, spinning prisoners dizzy. As a bizarre discipline, some 18th century authorities believed dizziness could knock sense into troublemakers. The whirligig was a small cage mounted to spin quickly. An offender climbed inside, often with barely enough room to stand. Guards or assistants then spun the cage around again and again. Within minutes, the prisoner felt nauseous, disoriented, and completely miserable. Onlookers sometimes watched, half amused and half disturbed by the sight. Officials claimed the disorientation created strong associations with their misbehavior. Medical understanding of dizziness and stress barely existed in those centuries, so a weird carnival ride became a serious entry in punishment handbooks. Judges sentencing shoplifters to wear huge "I stole" signs. In some 20th century American courts, creativity replaced longer jail sentences. Certain judges ordered minor shoplifters to stand outside stores with signs. These signs announced their offense in big, humiliating letters to everyone. The offender might stand for hours under hot sun or cold wind. Friends, classmates, and coworkers sometimes walked by, watching awkwardly from sidewalks. Judges argued it saved taxpayer money and kept jails less crowded. Critics said it turned justice into public spectacle instead of rehabilitation. Photographs of sign wearers ended up in newspapers and family scrapbooks. A moment of bad judgment became a strangely documented piece of local history. Judge ordered noisy teens to listen only to classical music. One American judge got especially creative with teenagers blasting loud music. Instead of standard fines, he banned them from listening to preferred genres. For a set period, they had to listen exclusively to classical recordings. Sometimes they sat in a courtroom or probation office wearing headphones. The judge claimed they would learn respect and broaden their cultural taste. Reporters loved the story, turning the unusual sentence into national curiosity. Some teens later admitted it was boring, but better than jail time. Others rolled their eyes and turned the punishment into a private joke. Justice briefly became a forced listening party featuring Beethoven instead of bass drops. Making speeders stand holding. "I drove like a fool" placards. Several judges in the United States experimented with sign-based driving punishments. People caught speeding recklessly sometimes held large placards by busy roads. The signs announced that the person had driven dangerously or irresponsibly there. Drivers passing by saw the message and the embarrassed offender together. Local news stations occasionally filmed the scenes for evening broadcasts. The goal was to scare others into slowing down at those spots. Offenders shifted uncomfortably, sweating through hours of standing in public view. Some critics argued the humiliation didn't improve actual long-term driving habits. Still, for one afternoon, justice looked like roadside advertising against bad behavior. Forcing bullies to walk school halls, wearing embarrassing loser signs. In some schools, administrators tackled bullying with their own flavor of cruelty. A few principals made bullies wear handwritten signs in crowded hallways. The sign might describe them as mean, cruel, or a loser. The student had to walk past peers during class changes while watched. Some kids laughed, others looked away, unsure how to react. Schools hoped the humiliation would discourage future teasing and physical intimidation. Instead, it sometimes deepened resentment and escalated quiet grudges later. Psychologists increasingly criticized these strategies as damaging rather than corrective. The approach simply flipped bullying around, with adults now leading the shaming. Mandatory haircuts, shaving prisoners' heads as so-called moral discipline. Across many prison systems, hair became another tool of control and punishment. New inmates often had their heads shaved upon arrival at facilities. Officials justified it as hygiene, discipline, or protection against lice outbreaks. In practice, the haircut stripped away identity, style, and personal dignity. Some regimes extended the rule to political prisoners, not just violent offenders. Photographs show rows of shaved heads in uniforms, blurring individual differences. Inmates sometimes described feeling naked, even while still wearing clothes. The haircut signaled total submission to the institution's rules and authority. A few seconds with clippers announced exile from normal life more loudly. Fining women for wearing pants instead of floor-know-how dresses. For a long time, clothing laws policed women's legs far more than men's. In various Western cities, ordinances restricted women from wearing pants in public. Violators risked fines, arrests, or at least being hauled to police stations. Some laws dated back to concerns about disguises or soldiers' uniforms. Others reflected fear of women stepping into traditionally male jobs and spaces. In some cases, women needed special permits to wear trousers for work. Activists occasionally challenged the rules by walking streets in tailored suits. Their confrontations with police often made headlines and fueled debates. Slowly, social pressure flipped, and those old laws became historical curiosities. Jailing people overnight for swearing within earshot of a church. In certain conservative towns, bad language could literally land you in lockup. Local ordinances punished cursing near churches, schools, or public buildings. Police sometimes arrested people after loud street arguments or bar fights. The offender might spend a night in a holding cell as punishment. Some places added fines, especially if children allegedly heard the language. Defenders said they were protecting public decency and community standards. Critics pointed out how selectively these rules were often enforced. Tourists and newcomers sometimes learned the boundaries the hard, embarrassing way. Simple, angry words briefly carried the same consequence as more serious misbehavior. Shame cloaks covered in symbols forced on offenders during church. In parts of early modern Europe, church services doubled as punishment stages. Offenders wore special cloaks or garments marked with symbols of their sins. Someone convicted of gossip might wear embroidered mouths or tangled tongues. Adulterers wore hearts or other suggestive imagery stitched into rough fabric. They had to sit in visible pews where everyone could watch quietly. Priests sometimes mentioned them indirectly during sermons about morality and repentance. Neighbors saw the garments and whispered interpretations among themselves afterward. Once the service ended, the garment came off, but memory stayed. Sunday worship blended spiritual reflection with tightly controlled public shaming theater. Punishing servants who broke dishes with docked wages and beatings. In wealthy households, fragile porcelain sometimes mattered more than human skin. Servants who dropped plates or glasses could face more than angry words. Masters might dock wages heavily, erasing weeks of hard domestic labor. Some employers added slaps, lashes, or extra chores late into night. Breaking an imported plate from China could trigger especially furious reactions. Servants often worked tired, juggling hot pans, heavy trays, and demanding guests. Accidents were inevitable in cramped kitchens, thick with steam and smoke. Yet every slip became proof, supposedly, of laziness or moral weakness. Punishment protected status symbols, while ignoring the exhausting conditions creating mistakes. Blaming and fining entire families for one relative's petty crimes. In many cultures, the law once stretched beyond the actual offender. When one person broke rules, authorities sometimes punished their relatives too. Families might owe fines, taxes, or extra labor to cover misdeeds. In some places, relatives were barred from certain jobs after a crime. The idea was that shared responsibility would prevent future troublemaking relatives. Instead, it crushed already struggling households with extra economic hardship. Brothers, parents, and cousins faced stigma despite never touching the stolen item. Records show communities treating whole family names with suspicion afterward. Justice blurred into guilt by association, erasing individual choice and accountability. Making prisoners march in circles for hours, achieving absolutely nothing. Some prisons perfected the art of exhausting people without producing any work. Inmates marched around yards, courtyards, or tracks for hours each day. Guards barked orders to keep pace, even in scorching sun. The march rarely moved supplies, built roads, or accomplished real tasks. Its main purpose was obedience training through boredom and physical fatigue. Feet blistered, uniforms soaked with sweat, and tempers simmered silently. Talking during these marches could trigger additional punishment or lost privileges. The endless loop symbolized life behind bars, constant motion, zero progress. It turned time itself into another heavy weight prisoners dragged behind them. Town. Drunk tanks locking people up just for sleeping on benches. In many 20th century towns, police used special cells for intoxicated locals. These so-called drunk tanks held people picked up from sidewalks or parks. Sometimes the offense was simply sleeping on a bench after drinking. Officers hauled them in to sober up overnight on concrete slabs. No trial, just a temporary stay in a cold, bare room. Regulars became familiar faces, known by bartenders and patrol officers alike. The system did little to address addiction, poverty, or mental health. Instead, it moved visible discomfort out of sight until morning arrived. Public space stayed tidy, while underlying problems walked back out at sunrise. Forced public apologies where offenders knelt while everyone laughed. In many communities, the most painful part of punishment was bending knees. Offenders knelt in front of crowds, sometimes in front of churches. They recited prepared apologies, promising better behavior under watchful eyes. Spectators chuckled, whispered, or openly mocked their trembling voices and posture. Sometimes relatives stood nearby, trying not to show their own embarrassment. Officials believed confession would cleanse both the person and the community. But the scene also reinforced who held power around that square. Once the words were spoken, the offender rose with reddened cheeks. The record of that kneeling moment lingered long after the punishment ended.